Hotep family, how are you doing? So we're gonna do lesson 17. This is on communism. I'm Onitaset Kumat, author and founder of I'm the author of the Book of Power and the author of the Pro-Black Compendium, as well as Iberi and the Ruins of Ma'ah. And this is the Pro-Black Perspective on KWAZ Radio. This is lesson 17 of the course on African philosophy, and this is by Marcus Garvey, and you know the book as Message to the People. So let's keep doing this right here. This is lesson 17 on communism. Communism is a white man's creation to solve his own political and economic problems. It suggests the enthronement of the white working class over the capitalist class of the race. It was conceived by white men who were in sympathy with the economic struggles of their own white masses. It was never conceived and originally intended for the economic or political emancipation of the blacks, but rather to raise the earning capacity of the lowest class of white workers. Understand this. It's not a philosophy for you. It's a philosophy for white people, for white workers. That's all. It was founded principally on the theory of Karl Marx, who knew very little about Negroes and who thought and wrote less about them. In fact, if you look at what he writes about them, they're unsavory writings. And Hegel is even worse. Hegel, who Karl Marx bases his dialectical materialism off of, because Hegel has his dialectical whatever. No, Hegel has a dialectical materialism. Hegel thought black people didn't even have a history. Like, Hegel thought black people did not even have a history. Like, they have done nothing but wait for white people to show up and bring them civilization. That's the foundations for Marxism. And you can look into it. I think I think it's on my Twitter, but you don't want me to go into it right now. It is dangerous. It is a dangerous theory of economic and political reformation because it seeks to put government in the hands of an ignorant white mass who have not been able to destroy their natural prejudices towards Negroes and other non-white people. So white people have a natural prejudice against us. And again, like I said, you have to go by the nature of things. You have to go by the nature of things. The nature of white people is off. Okay, it's not the same as the nature of African people. It's not the same as our nature. It's different. It is a different nature. Because of that, you cannot hope to be in the same community. It doesn't take a rocket scientist. I'm actually gonna enlighten you with this story. I don't believe the story. But it's allegorical. So I want you to take away with this. So there's this gentleman in America named Claude Anderson. Claude Anderson is explaining he's explaining that originally when Africans were taken to America, if you will, or when Africans arrived to America, they had the same liberty as any other people. They were able to vote, have good jobs and all that stuff. What happened in that is that you had a bunch of black men, not too many black women, let's say. So these black men needed to have, look, you want to get some. You understand? You want to get something, So they were marrying white women. And they were the better partners in life, you see? Because one of the things you have to understand about black people is that one of the reasons why they're even in the West is because they are beautiful. They are sexually gifted in multiple ways. They are more athletic. They have more rhythm. It's like if you wanna, let's be adults. I mean, if you're not an adult, close your ears, but cover your ears. But let's be adults. The black person is probably the best relationship you can have. Just off of physical facts. And not just physical facts, but just having that emotion, that everything about us just says, hey, that's the best kind of partner I can have. So that's part of the reason why black people are still in America, because they are essentially the best that you can have. And you'll know this because a lot of tourism that goes on in Africa is sex tourism. A lot of them, it's sex tourism, even pedophilia sometimes, a lot of times, which is gross. I don't know why they're doing it, but this is what I'm saying, that we are by nature just the better species, if you will, the better race, and no, you're not going to get a fair shake. You are the more desirable person. You are the more intelligent. You are everything better and for that reason they organized against you. And the ignorant white mass will always be against you, because when everything is all said and done, you're going to outclass them. Without the superiority that's given by their government, you would outclass them in every way. And who wants that? Well, they don't. So while it may be a good thing for them, it will be a bad thing for the Negroes, who will fall under the government of the most ignorant, prejudiced class of the white race. The ignorant white man is cruel and prejudiced because of his very ignorance. Therefore, you may see how dangerous it would be to place in his hands, by the very strength of his numbers, a government dictated and controlled by him. While the capitalistic system is ruthless and bad, it nevertheless gives the Negro a chance for employment competitive with the working classes of white men, for the purpose of extracting profit from labor, irrespective of the color of labor. This is something important to realize, that even though we like to critique, the white power structure, you have to realize that the white power structure keeps the white masses at bay. If you're not preparing to defend yourself, you will show yourself to be defenseless before a mob that is very willing to do away with you. Is very willing to do away with you. That's something for you to consider. Let's keep going. The Negro, not being an industrial employer, shares therefore the opportunity to labor in competition with the white worker only because the white capitalist is willing to use anybody who can contribute the most profit to his industries, regardless of color. Okay? So if you're not an industrial employer, then you can be a worker as well, because of this capitalist who says, I'll do it regardless of color. The capitalist white man is an enemy of communism for the preservation of his own interests, if nothing more. If the Negro is not his own industrial employer and loses the goodwill of white capitalist employers because he is a communist, he will find himself unemployed. That's it. Because if you're not an employer and you're not in the goodwill of the employers, you'll be unemployed. Duh. You see what I'm saying? Like he's saying, don't even risk it. This is what the communist wants, so as not to have a black competitor. This will enable him to dictate his terms to the white employer and get him at the expense of the unemployed Negro, because he too is a communist. You see, because what happens is this: if the employer needs some employee, he needs some employee, and if you're the only good employee, then he doesn't have to sweat the white man's demands. He doesn't have to set the white communist demands, because he's like, look, if you don't want to work, it's okay. I got a bunch of happy Negroes. But if he radicalizes the Negro, okay, if he radicalizes Africans, what happens then is that the African will be fired as well, and now the capitalist is without any workers. If you're doing a what's called a union strike, I believe, a strike, which is nobody's gonna work, right? They would pull in what they call scabs. The union workers would call them scabs, which are people like temporary employees who accept the piss poor terms that the capitalist offers. The white communist does not want this, and so that's a part of the reason why he would radicalize you and promote communism or socialism or whatever you would call it, unionism and all that stuff. That's why he would do it. But let's keep going. The idea of a communist inviting Negroes to join their ranks is to support their theory that Negroes are communists too, so that if a white employer has to decide between a black communist and a white communist, by the appeal of race, the white communist will get the consideration and the advantage. Therefore, the schemes coming from the white communists is to make Negroes communists. It is vile and a wicked scheme. The communists have created their own party, an organization of which they are the international leaders. They alone as executives know the policy and design of the Communist Party, which are kept from Negroes for the purpose of fooling them into a sense of false security. And this is true. Open up, I tell you, there's 12 books you're supposed to read. One of them is Race First. Race First will give you insight into the Communist Party, and it's what it was doing. It was trying to take from Garvey this UNIA membership for Russia. Okay? And Russia had its private, or the USSR, the Soviet Union, had its own private, discussions without you present, but they were trying to get you there, because if you were on their side, they could negotiate without you and negotiate a place that you weren't. Talk about it. When it is considered that all the outrages in war, mob violence, and extreme punishment have been administered to the Negro by the lowest class of white agents, as soldiers in war, as sailors, and as the mob, the Negro should have no doubt that his greatest enemy is the common white man, who does not have enough intelligence to know the injury that he is doing to a race, even if he is paid to do so by his master. All wars in Africa and the colonies where the natives have been shot down and punished were carried out by whom? The common white man in the ranks. In the lynchings that have occurred in the southern sections of the United States of America, the mob has always been made up of who? The lowest class of the white race. No governor, state official, or major aristocrat has ever been found in the mob or leading the mob. The mob has always been made up of the common ignorant people from whom communists are made up of, and whom the party is intended to give political power and economic advantages. Again, the people who lynched you, those are whom the communists want as the masters of this planet. Don't go into it. The threat to run Negroes out of Jamestown, PA, and the cotton fields of Mississippi and other sections of the United States were threats that came from the common white people. They served notices which stated, "Nigger, don't let the sun go down on you in this town." Those are what was called sundown towns. It was the common white people of Cardiff, Wales, who in 1923 stopped the funeral procession of a dead Negro seaman, smashed the coffin, cut off his head, and made a football of it in the streets as a protest of Negroes being employed as seamen in Cardiff while white men wanted work. In South Africa, East Africa, and Southwest Africa, it is the poorer white colonists who practice the most wicked discrimination and persecute the natives to rob them of their rights. Everywhere it is the poor colonists and the poor white man who carries out the dirty work of prejudice against Negroes. These are the class of people for whom communism is intended. Consider that the socialists, the communists, and the trade unionists of the white races are all agitating for higher wages and better living conditions. It is evident that these economic improvements must only come at the expense of greater exploitation of weaker people. The weaker people before were the Chinese, the East Indians, and the Negroes. However, the Chinese have organized national resistance. The Indians have also organized national resistance. Therefore, only the Negro who is exposed to the most ruthless exploitation is left to be exploited in the future. Surely, the low-class working white man will stop at nothing to raise his stature, even as controller of governments through communism, even though it crushes the Negro. Hence, the Negro must realize that he is being played for a sucker. And I want you to really understand this. The Chinese, the East Indians, and the Chinese and the East Indians have done something that the Negro hasn't. And that is implement these ideas that you can find in the Book of Power. I'm saying this to say that the Chinese have universities and schools and an economic system, and the East Indians have universities and schools and economic system. And I actually read an East Indian tell us. I actually read an East Indian say, "Hey, why don't black people have universities?" That's how we in India. That's how we rose up from our position. And this is coming from the horse's mouth. You have to understand that there are ways to elevate yourself and your people in power, and those ways are going to be outlined in the ways are outlined in this book, and you'll understand this book a little more if you listen to a little song. So without further ado, let us engage in a little break while I go and pay some bills, right? Okay, so I know books, alright? So let me tell you about a book. Alright, check it. So the goal and objective is to be selective, elective for knowledge with the black directive, checking sources, heritage, and legacies, with the brilliance to defeat our nemesis. The Book of Power, so aptly named, esteemed and famed for informing the brain and doing the same as the ancestors before us. Sankofa, that's the life chorus. Wisdom is the key against dangers, and the hinge of leaders will lead to changes. We are doing Africa with no strangers. Do you hear hear us? Okay, hold on. We can't continue to beat the second fiddle. African power is the end of this fiddle. Let's build a nation, the likes which never existed. The motto heretofore, we persisted. Better, we resisted. Best, we building. We'll raise the roof and break through the ceiling. Peeling away the change we were given to stop just surviving, start thriving and living. Africa's about to host superpowers. China and US back up in time hours. No one can be free without freeing themselves. But freedom is shown and owned on bookshelves. The book of power, a key for liberation. There's no domination. Where there's education, because ignorance is man's main weakness. All of exploited the street don't teach this. Then the pages of sages, king and queen. Akapon, Delay, Dessalines, Nyere, Garvey, and Zinga, and Cooks. 500 pages surpassing most books. The task is told to bring up the confident. You will hold the tone for the confident. Have some pride and push forward your chest. Your leaders are reading one of the best. The book has science, covers violence, self-reliance, and does away with silence. The time has come for the work to get done and build up a land that is second to none. We'll organize, technologize, strategize a new Africa before our eyes, and blackness will be the complexion we see. Anytime we envision what it means to be free. So come join minds, read what is written. Here be solutions, no longer hidden. Nothing works in theory, all that works, works and works. So it's time to put ourselves first. Change the leaders and lead the changes. Tell your friends, family, and neighbors. Change the leaders and lead the changes. Tell your friends, family, and neighbors. Change the leaders and lead the changes. Tell your friends, family, and neighbors. Change the leaders and lead the changes. Book of Power. So the Book of Power can be purchased on Amazon. Just click on the link below. Alright, Ptah Htp. Tulele ma'at, tushine is fek. Tulele ma'at, tushine is fek. Tulele ma'at, tushine is fek. Hotep. Alright, so yeah, paid that bill. Let's go. When the Negro must do is to let the communists fight their own battles and stand back to watch the fight. The Negro must take advantage of the opportunities presented during the fight, but he must not join the fight as a communist because he will be helping to bear the brunt of the battle, but no guarantee that his condition will be better, but objectively worse, because he will help to transfer government from the more intelligent and cultured in behavior to that of the ignorant and more prejudiced and most cruel. The man who caught your forefathers in Africa was not the white capitalist, but the white sailor, who is a class of man from whom the communists are made. He is dangerous to the Negro's liberty as a common man and as an ignorant man. Never join him to destroy the intelligence that rules the civilization that has given you existence up to the present time. Anytime you are asked to join the Communist Party by your communist associate or acquaintance, tell him in answer, when you get to Russia, but not before then. Read Statement on Communism and the Negro and the Philosophy and Opinions of Marcus Garvey. If you want to learn more, read Race First, read Philosophies and Opinions, read whatever you can. Read. Thank you for listening. Ptah Htp.